Joining us now with the bottom line is Michael Bills, executive in residence at OSU's Fisher College of Business. Michael, thanks for your time. We appreciate it.
Thanks for having me.
That consumer experience, that's what it's all about these days, right?
Absolutely. In fact, I don't think it's cheesy at all for him to say that he's a customer experience officer. It is sort of the foundation and cornerstone of how brands are interacting with their consumers today.
You look back at companies might have just simply been emailing and blasting their customers with ads and emails and whatnot. It's not that way anymore, right?
No.
And how so?
Yeah, at the advent of the internet, or the advent of social media, I should say, 36, 48 months ago, a lot of the conversation was about how we utilize databases, data mining, email lists. But today, those are really dynamic. If you have a viral solution from a social media perspective, consumers can populate that with amazing speed. So it has less to do with sort of traditional customer relationship management and more to do with customer experience management. And the difference is really quite simple, but also really profound. Customer relationship management tends to deal with POS data, historical sales data about how a consumer interacted with your brand.
Right.
Whereas customer experience management is really about understanding how the consumer embraces or doesn't embrace your brand, your products, your services in real time in their lives, and understanding what they want from you.
And in that experience, you say that you have to be concerned with two things, transparency and openness. What do you mean by that?
The idea of transparency is really about sort of recognizing that this is a two-way dialogue and that there is perspectives and perceptions of the brand that the consumers have, real or imagined, fair or unfair, and that they're going to express those regardless of whether you participate in that conversation. So this is really about saying, you know, we understand that there is this perception. A lot of folks initially from a social media perspective and inside organizations wanted to minimize the amount of negative criticism on their blogs or on their social media applications, but are increasingly understanding that not only gives validity to the positive output, but also allows for them to recover from any sort of negative customer perceptions.
You, of course, teach and preach all of these things at Fisher.
Sure do, yeah.
Whether it's a student or a business or whoever it may be, how do you keep up with the changes? Because things could be different a week from now.
Yeah, well, in fact, they will be. And so, you know, there's a new application, a new social media solution, you know, dozens of those seemingly every day. So it isn't about necessarily populating or sort of pursuing all of those routes because you sort of exhaust all your internal capabilities, and not only financially but human capital wise. So it is more about sort of making measured strategies to understand where you can focus and where you can get the biggest bang for the buck, but also knowing your customer from a segmentation perspective, understanding who your consumer is and what they're using, what social media solutions they are using and will be using in the future, and understanding how to develop a dialogue that will resonate with them.
There's an interesting concept also that you have as over information. I didn't know that was possible, right?
Yeah,
Is it too much?
Yeah.
Too much is not enough. Right?
No, there's a lot of futurists, a lot of folks in this space that are talking increasingly about the need for consumers to filter information through actual filter mechanisms and utilizing social media as one of those filters based on what their friends, their family, their colleagues that they interact with on the social media are interested in and how they get this information. So brands need to understand that increasingly this information is not only filtered by the consumer but by their friends and family and start to create an ecosystem of information that is based purely on their worldview, on how they think, what they like, what they don't like. So it isn't just an issue of putting out that information. You have to recognize that the social media is actually a filtering device itself.
And likewise for the business that's putting out the information, is sometimes less is more? Does that apply sometimes?
Yeah, it can be. I mean, I think often it's more about, it's not so much about quantity, but about putting the right quality information in front of the consumer where and how they want to consume it. I think increasingly location-based social media solutions will become important, like Foursquare. Right now, they tend to be a little gimmicky and simplistic. You know, rewarding someone because they show up at Starbucks with a free cup of coffee isn't a bad thing. It isn't necessarily all that terribly compelling. But I think as brands experiment with it and as consumers become accustomed to participating in it, there's some really dynamic opportunities for that application. And I think it's an example of how consumers are really utilizing social media, and companies are understanding how to harness social media in a manner that is really about in their real lives, not just when they're at home at the end of the day looking over their Facebook account and seeing sort of who they've talked to that day or who's been around and doing what. And instead, this is in real time out in their real lives.
From a business point of view, they needed a return on this investment. They are not nonprofit organizations, many of them, some of them are, but they want a return on this investment.
Sure.
How do you make make sure that happens. You know, some of the CEOs out there may feel that there is no return from the internet.
Yeah, well, you know, the reality is that most marketing vehicles, including advertising, which, you know, people talk about broadcast or print advertising as being, you know, infinitely measurable, but the truth is that there are just as many sort of analytical analysis and rigor that can be applied to the internet. Analytics is obviously a huge space in the digital area, but it's also really about understanding that the relative cost of investment is minuscule in some cases by comparison to broadcast or print advertising.
All right, Michael Bills from the Fisher College of Business. Michael, good information.
Thanks.
We appreciate it.